IVM.
Platforms built with editorial content at their core are most times built around a specific audience and grow on the basis of the depth of content they provide and the trust they garner. With each platform, there is a ton to learn about on how to build and grow captive audiences and keep them engaged. There is no community that requires more trust and depth than that around kids and their parents. And to dig deeper into this, I have Mansi Zaveri, the founder of Kidsstoppress and the host of the podcast Raising Parents on Advertising is Dead this week, to understand all the learnings around parents and all the things around their kids and what she's learned by doing that both at Kidsstoppress but also through her journey as a podcast host. That's what's ahead in this week's episode of Advertising is Dead. I'm Varun Duggirala. Be right back with Mansi Zaveri.
Hi, I'm Zarina Poonawalla, host of the Empowering Series podcast on the IVM network. I happen to be a peak performance coach and leadership coach by profession, and I'm here to share with you productivity tools, life-altering techniques, and real-life hacks to help you achieve your maximum potential in everything you do, your relationships, professions, careers. So tune in every Monday to unleash your inner power. Be safe, be well, be empowered.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead with Mansi. I'm always happy to have a podcaster on the show. Mansi, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Ever since you and I connected and I've had the pleasure of being on your podcast, I've actually dug into all the stuff that you do. And one of the things I found interesting is, because as a parent, I look at the entire parent content space as something that I don't think there is ever enough or if it is ever curated enough. But I'd love to start from where your journey kind of began in building out Kidsstoppress and maybe a little before that. I mean, what you did before that, before you got into doing this.
Right. So, let me start with, I am one of 4 daughters, and everybody in my house is, and in the good old days, Varun, is your WhatsApp on? So, in the good old days, everybody and my sisters and everybody, graduates, postgraduates, double postgraduates, CA and engineering and doctor, only 3 professions. And because I was the last one, I think my parents had said, "Kabhi usko jo karna hai, let her do." I said, "Kuch to." But they're like, "Okay, let her do whatever she wants to do." And I said, "Okay, I want to do marketing." And they're like, "Oh my God," and I said, "I want to do advertising." They're like, "Oh, no. Those girls just smoke and drink. You're not doing advertising." And then to my luck, I did my summer internship with O&M, and I used to come home my first day of internship, and I came home at 4 a.m. And my mom's like, "This job is not happening. You cannot be coming home at 4 a.m. And that too in the deserted days of Kamla Mill." Like Kamla Mills wasn't Kamla Mills that time. And it was crazy because, but I always was very fascinated by the world of advertising, marketing, reading body copy of magazines and, flipping through magazines, looking at billboards and saying, I want to be on a billboard one day. I don't know for what strange reason. But I was most fascinated by all of that. And also I loved, in grade 7, I used to write a diary. And my mom used to be again like, "Are you wasting time? Who's going to read a diary? Why do we need to write a diary?" And, when I look back, and I think it's important to mention this because, when you're in the moment, you never know how big that moment can become. And that one day might seem like an eternity. And, then I was always, because I was working on the Hindustan lever businesses, and there was a lot of consumer work that we do. And anybody who's worked on lever businesses, it's like the best training ground you can get, hours and hours of consumer work and stuff. And I used to love observing people. And that's it. Then I was like, "Acha, abhi, whatever I had to do here is done. Now there's more artwork that I can manage and more that I can do. But this is it." And then my bosses moved out, who I think are phenomenally good. And that's why I stopped. And then I said, "I want to do retail now." So I moved to the Tata Group for retail. Then I said, "I want to do, premium luxury brands now." And so I moved to FC UK then, which was below 2006, 2008. And that's when I tasted startup culture, right? Because we used to clean floors, sweep stores, stand behind cash tools when the first store opened and all of that. And that's when the first, and like Oprah says, you get these little whispers always in life, right? And then they become loud noises. And I'm a true believer of that. That was whisper one, that I loved seeing not one part of business, but I loved seeing the entire business. That was one whisper. In 2008, I had my elder daughter, and and I used to drive from Metro to Worli Seaface without looking up outside in that billboard, which I was most fascinated. I would never look at those billboards. I was constantly typing on my BlackBerry and trying to overcompensate being a full-time working mom. That listen, I'm like this alpha woman, and motherhood doesn't slow me down, and all that shit that women go through, right? And strangely, that's when the second whisper happened. Listen, people are going to spend more and more time on this phone. You better do something. That was the second whisper. And the third was, I was like, abhi head of marketing, then VP marketing, then director marketing. Basically, khali designations badal the role same hi rehta hai, right? Matlab 1 crore budget, you'll handle 100 crores, 100, you'll handle 1,000. But it's just, shit, I shouldn't say this on your show. Because everybody is I'm going to make everybody feel like, oh my God. No, but please edit this part, okay? But seriously, I just feel like they do the same free job. Please, one has to be edited. But having said that, that's when the third whisper happened, and I took a sabbatical for 6 months, traveled with my 2.5-year-old to the US all alone without my husband. I hopped cities, every city I wanted to go to. I planned what I want to do in that city on that very morning. And that was it. I came back, I told my boss, this is it, I'm quitting. And I came back and I said, I have to start this. And that's it. I came back in July 2011. I quit. August 1st, 2011, I put up the website, server, doing all of that. And the good part was that when I was at FC UK, I'd already started influencer marketing, and, I'd already got a lot of people who would talk about FC UK as a brand, and, build in that sort of culture of bringing a lot of bloggers and building it as a lifestyle brand. So I think every role was a stepping stone to who I am today. And I think that helped tremendously in kind of building Kidsstoppress. And then 2012, till then I was beta testing, and then 2012, after my second one was born, I just launched it on her birthday.
When I think about that period, right, when you started off, what I find interesting is that there weren't as many, like I became a father in 2017, and I knew that we were still trying to find a lot of resources, trying to understand what brands to use. A lot of the, forget about dads, and that's a whole different topic which I want to get into with you. But from a content space, a lot of the stuff was international. From a brand space, you would have it traditionals. We obviously had understanding that some brands, because you would read stuff and it's okay, maybe not this one, let's look at chemicals. And I think some of us did have that in our heads, but it's not like we had enough. And this is 2017. So when you started off, what are the first set of pieces that you really wanted to build out? Because on one end, you're talking about kids and parents and content around them. So if there is filtering that you need to do and analysis you have to do, this is like even far deeper that you have to go. Talk me through the first initial parts of setting something like this up, and what did you kind of learn during that period, and what were how did you start it off in really bringing an audience in?
Right. So honestly, you're absolutely right, Varun. When I became a parent, trust me, nobody in my friend circle was a parent. I was one of the first ones. So that was like another thing that, oh my God, I'm like the first one. The first one's always the scary stuff. And, you're absolutely right. There was no Indian brand or Indian parent doing something like that. So my reference was always a baby center, but I never wanted to go the prescriptive way because that's a whole different ballgame. And I'll tell you where it all started. So my pediatrician, who I owe the idea to, I used to go to him with a list of questions each time written in a black book. And he'd say, and Dr. Balsekar, to everybody who goes for him. But he said, Mansi, why don't you start like a blog or something? And, then I won't have to answer so many questions. So he's like, do research of the previous month, what has happened in this month and of the next month. You're taking a lot of my time. So I said, yeah, that's not a bad idea. And, I was confused. I was confused whether my mom would say, like, feed the baby dal ka pani when the baby's 6 months, and baby center would say, come on, now it's time for applesauce. So I had, contrary to what people feel, that we didn't have a lot of knowledge back then. I feel for me, it was a paradox of choice. It was too many choices to make. And, then there is the regional element that comes in, right? So somebody wants to feed their kids South Indian first food. Somebody wants to feed in Gujarati first food. So there was a lot of khichdi that happened in my life. So I said, boss, I actually drew out what is the mother most paranoid about. And she's paranoid about education. She's paranoid about food. And she's paranoid about, about how she's spending her time with her child. The biggest filter I applied to each of these was, is it worth the parents? I think that's a filter we still apply today. That curation will always be very key in whatever we do. If it's not worth 2 minutes of that parent's time, don't put it out there. Because, I think the busiest person is a parent.
For sure.
And his time is most precious. So how can you, because I know that we've got readers who are saying, listen, I'm reading this in between my feeds, or I'm reading this in the middle of the night, or I'm reading this while dropping my child to school, or I'm reading this while teaching my child. How can I be dishonest to that user when she's so loyal to me, he's so loyal? So I think we've mapped out, I literally, and I still have that Excel spreadsheet, every single milestone that the baby would go through in a particular month. I mapped my content to that and to every single confusion that I would have as a parent, and then how that child would grow. And that's it. And I just clapped it all in together. And now we literally have a playbook for every city, every milestone, every new age bracket that we add. But I always tell my team that just, and we're largely all parents on the team, understand the problem statement and what you are feeling at this point in time, and how confused you are as going through that milestone that parent is going through, and you will find a lot of answers right there.
You mentioned a team, right? And I feel that's another element that comes into it, especially because you built the company and you built the product around, and I say product because you're building so much content out of it, around a certain thought process. And many times when you bring more people in, you kind of have to build that into each of their mindsets and how they're kind of taking it forward, how they're curating it. So none of that goes sideways in that sense. So when you look at these aspects, are there specific ways that you kind of use? So when this is what we focus on, this is what we don't, this is how we do it or not, or also have you let it evolve with each of them? And how is it? Because I think that funnel is very important.
So I'll be honest, at the start, I laid out a lot of, and I tell this to all the founders, don't wait to create your playbook 5 years down the line, because there's so many things that you'll forget and so many processes that you forget that it kind of becomes very difficult. I built that playbook just from an operations point of view. But I'll be honest that every new team member, every new parent who comes in, brings in so much more value, and I think that brings in a lot of diversity. Like there are, there are Tamil moms, and there are Punjabi moms, and there are, South. I mean, there are Bengali moms, and there are just so many of them. Plus, we have a network of over 300 contributors writing in from India and globally. So I think that is what it is. That is what, because they, at some point in time, and that was a very conscious effort as well, Varun, because I knew that my kids were not going to, and I didn't want to be an influencer only. That was very clear in my mind. Because then you're building for the short term, right? When you want to build it for the long term, it has to be very clear that you're building it out to address. It's like a tunnel, It's like, think of yourself going from Bombay to Lanata, right? How different cars just keep passing through that tunnel. That's exactly what you're building. You have to let different people going through different life statuses pass through that tunnel, and if some people may connect with me, some people may connect with you, somebody may connect with somebody, some completely different. So that was the idea, that let them bring in that diversity, let them bring in that culture, let them. And like I said, India is so different in every aspect that if you don't address that, it's going to be a big problem. But at the same time, one fabric that we keep constant is we will never be prescriptive. We will never, unlike Facebook groups or, your WhatsApp group, मेरे बच्चे को बुखार आ गया है, अच्छा आप medicine दे दो. We'll never do that. Or, oh my God, my kid has got burned. What should I do? Damn it, go to the doctor. I'm not going to advise you on that. So stuff like that. Or if it is about, putting your, earlier on, I would get so many things. This is my child's portfolio. Please tell me which company he can be a child ambassador for. I'm saying so many of these things which were a complete no-no for us. Like we never put out, we would never do contests, giveaways, promotions, anything which involved you getting your kids and doing some song and dance and say, okay, now we can win 10,000 rupees or whatever. There were some clear values, I think, and I think everybody starting out clearly indicates those values. We stuck to that. Then the content can be around.
You mentioned how India is so different in the number of different categories that are there, right? And I sometimes think about how it must have been for parents a couple of generations before. And I feel that so this is a problem with too much information and too less information. They didn't have a choice. What people before them did, you followed that unless somebody gifted you a book. Now the problem is that there's so much information out there, and I love the fact that you said that on one end you'll have someone run around and give you a local, in our community, in our culture kind of a solution. You'll read it online and it'll be an international solution, and there'll be some Indian ones coming in as well. Almost kind of filtered through that is, I think, a large part of parents' lives now, which I don't think it was as much before. Because I know that whenever I've spoken to my parents, or Pooja's mom as well, I know for a fact that for them it's like, why you guys try, this was simpler. You guys have complicated it, but I feel that it's also because I think we're more aware. And as you bring out content as well, have you also realized that when you look at the consumer is very different year after year, not even before it used to be generation by generation, but I think year after year, the parent consumer, if I have to call it that, has kind of changed. And what kind of changes have you seen?
So I'll be honest. I agree that the consumer is changing year after year, and I feel we're becoming more paranoid as parents. But I have also seen a lot of things that will take to circle. So example, when back in 2012, when I would talk, or when my first one, 2008, 2010, when we would talk about alternative medication or things like that, people would be like, oh my God, no, and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of reservation or, resistance towards it. But I see people coming back a full circle. Like we just did a session with a homeopath recently, and it went crazy. We had like over 1,000 people registering for that session. But so I see in many ways that it comes back. But in many ways, yes, I feel like the wallet size of the Indian parent is only growing. And, that was one of the points that I often, if you think of it, if you have to buy, if you had only 100 rupees to spend, you as a father, if you needed a pair of shoes, and here we're talking of limited resources, right? We're talking if you had to buy a pair of shoes and your child also needed something and your wife needed something, you would perhaps say, okay, you know what, I'll buy my shoes. But if your child needed it, you would prioritize it. If your child needed shoes, you go to the store and try it because your child's feet are formative and they need a certain amount of this, that, and that. Look at the decision making that you're doing in buying your shoes and buying your child's shoes, right? There is tremendous amount of decision making. It's such a high involvement item. And that consumer is so involved in that. Versus in any others where you're like, okay, either I like a shirt or I don't like a shirt. Either I like a pair of shoes or I don't like a pair of shoes, right? So I feel that decision making has also increased year on year on year. And that becomes the amount of queries that we would get, say, from nuclear families earlier on, they have now increased fivefold or sixfold now because we see more people staying in nuclear families. Earlier, when I started out in 2012, 2013, we were anyways talking of 60% nuclear families. Now we're seeing a trend of it being more. Even stuff like, breastfeeding or or more natural ways of birthing, we see tremendous rise in that, right? Though we see that we're influenced by the Western culture, etc., we're seeing people come back to it and come back to it in a big way. So I'm saying a lot of the Indian home remedies or the Indian way of parenting in a big way, I feel, is coming back.
You spoke about just the wallet size of the Indian parent kind of going up, right? And I feel that's where I feel the number of brands as well have kind of scaled up, right? For every single need, for every single category now, there is so much. I remember there was a time when I'm sure my parents' time there was just one, like maybe one brand you would go like, and there was, and I didn't think they even had thought about options and stuff like that. So when you look at that and when you engage with brands, are there specific things that you almost say, you say to them when you kind of say, okay, if you're curating them as part of it, what are your filters and what have your conversations with them been like?
So you mean when we are reviewing brands or when we're collaborating with brands? Or
both?
So honestly, when we review brands, it's a ruthless process. Okay, it's a ruthless process to the extent that I've got calls from a lot of brands and saying, "Listen, can you tone this down, or this will really, really impact us, or is there anything that we can do?" Or they'll say that, "Hey, you know what? We want to do a 3-month collaboration with you soon after." But I know where it's coming from. So we're very ruthless in that process because, Varun, the biggest, if there's one asset or that one thing that I've garnered over the last 7 or 8 odd years doing Kidsstoppress is the trust of the parent, right? And under no circumstances I'm going to violate that, right? Because I feel it's taken me bloody long, lots of blood, sweat, tears to build that trust. And that's one thing I don't want to ever compromise on. So reviews are very, very ruthless, and there's not everything that we will talk about. From a brand's perspective, I must say it's been a journey. Like in 2012, 2013, when I would tell brands that, okay, we have a digital platform, you can connect to moms only, when you're connecting to other platforms, you're connecting to so many women, etc. But here you have a filtered audience, very targeted. I can even dissect the data, tell you month-wise, age of child, mother is in last trimester, first trimester, of course, only from a targeting perspective, not with sharing that data. But, that kind of evolution, they would not get it. Even if you had 75% market share in a category, the brands wouldn't get it. Now, of course, there's been a huge transition where brands have understood that, listen, I though my dollars spent on Kidsstoppress would be higher, it is, I'm targeting and focusing on a very, very solid audience. So I think they've understood the audience bit of it and the communication bit of it. But have they understood the means of communication? Or that it doesn't always need to be, hey, come buy my product. I don't know if that sort of evolution has happened at a brand level. They still want to show these are the 5 features of my brand. You have to say this, you have to say this, you have to say this. But they don't understand that, okay, what's the consumer problem that they're facing, right? So I think that has, it's evolving, but it's not 100% there.
What you just said reminds me of something I was reading yesterday, which said that, even like a decade ago, for brands, the focus had to be all about the product, whereas now it has to be focused on the solution. And the brands who can't make that shift are the ones who are going to be left behind. And you kind of articulated that in the exact same way, right? That's really the problem.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I keep, sometimes and especially when I get into brand solutions for some of the larger campaigns that we work with, I try explaining them what is your consumer's problem, right? And I'm not taking it away that they get that as much because they're the brand custodians, they're the owners. But I tell them, listen, I know the user on my platform. Let me do it in a certain fashion. But sometimes they're like, no, this is how it works. This is the blanket. And absolutely, I think everybody is focusing on the solution that they can provide, irrespective of whatever the problem of the audience is. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, because it is a tricky problem. And I feel that this isn't just for one category. I feel that across categories I can't think of a category where the consumer has not changed with this. Because If I look at the key things, right, on one end, consumers are looking for more choice. They're looking for better solutions. They're looking for, I think curation is key for them, because they want to, the solution shouldn't just be one. What are my options here? But they're also kind of looking for value in what they can kind of learn, because it's not a consumer who wants to say, okay, this is what I've bought, I've gotten it, and I've moved away. But rather, I'm someone who's gotten this and I've learned from it. So the next time I do this, I'm a little bit wiser, which means then the brands and everybody else around also has to be even more wiser in that sense of the word. So it is a tricky time, and especially when you look at a category like this, and I love categories that are captive like this, right? Because they're so focused on a specific journey, and that journey doesn't really change. I think all the elements around it changes, but there's so much to learn from looking at this specific category if you are building either a curated community or a brand or a product for any rather group in that sense of the word. So long-winded question, but so when you look at it from that sense, what are learnings that you had over the years which you feel that you can kind of adapt to anyone building something like this for any category of consumer?
So I would say one is invest in the community that you're building, right? Like, and this is something I tell to the brands as well. Give, before you ask, give, right? Example, every piece of, we've now started doing a lot of courses on Kidsstoppress, but I can afford to do that is because I have garnered enough trust, and I call this the trust triangle, right? Which is you have your trust, you have your values, and you have your promise. You can build on each of this, the trust, and then you provide them enough value, enough trust, and then your promise or your solution offering, right? So if you've never invested that, and every brand needs to go through that journey. If you give an example, if you were a personal care brand for a baby product, right? Like a soap or anything like that, give the mother solutions. Today, the mother is so frivolous. There is zero loyalty in the game, right? Today, you tell her this is better, she's confused. Tomorrow, you tell her this is better, she's confused. So there is just so much noise. But the reason for her to really, really stick to you is the fact that you've always been with her in that journey. What if you told her, listen, this is how you can make your bath time easier. This is some few bath time hacks that you can have. You know what? And I mean literally bath hacks, right? So example, if the baby pumps the bottle too much, tie a rubber band around it. You'll not be able to pump, and you'll not have a, like a, whatever, this foam bath in your
What?
bath.
I didn't know this.
So, you have these pump bottles, right? Just put a rubber band around the pump, and when you press it, the baby will not be able to, because it's not getting pressed full. Do you get my?
Oh,
There'll be.
I don't think it's a baby problem in my case, because I'm the one who gives layup bath very often. This is me pumping it in that sense. So it's a learning for me to make sure I don't do that mistake.
So I'm saying simple things like that, right? Another thing is so simple things like that. You're providing so much solution to the mom that she was never going to forget you. Engage with your audience. Whichever category you are in, whichever brand, stop telling me to buy. Give me a reason to buy, right? Stop telling me you're parabens free or this free or that free or whatever, right? It's okay. I mean, today 99% of the brands are paraben free, but why should I buy you? Right? So I think that is very, very important. Second, I feel is for any brand today, I feel the brand and the person behind the brand are kind of shrinking. So I feel a lot of founders, and especially in the D2C category, right? We see a lot of, like, a massive surge in that category. The founders kind of shy away from saying their story. I'm not saying you need to be a visual interface each time, but share your story. Because I don't know that happened to you, but over the last 1.5 years, I feel I connect more, and I feel that's only going to increase. We connect more with humans than with brands. And I want to buy into somebody's story, because I feel when that comes from a very personal space, a very personal problem, I think it kind of resonates and connects more. I feel like the founder or the person building the brand has to go through the problem statement, because I feel then you have so much more conviction, and you have so much more, you eat, breathe, sleep your consumer every single day, right? I've never sat, Varun, even when my kids were 3 or 4, I've never sat at the park, just watching them. I'm watching them, and I'm watching 25 other mothers sitting there, because I'm only thinking, what is she thinking? What is she thinking? And what is her problem? Her kid is fallen, something else has happened. What is the dabba she's opening? What else has she carried in her bag? So know your consumer, because I feel like every interaction with a potential consumer is scope for a great idea. So I would say that, and I feel that the other bit of it is just like I said, engage more, give more, and and just build the trust triangle. I think it tremendously helps your cause.
You know, the point you made about the park for me is what all founders should remember is the fact that if you're watching out for every single consumer and not for just what you would do normally, that is the when you know that okay, fine, you really are a founder focused on that that segment of things, because you are really looking at the market and not necessarily just the individuals in that sense of the word. But from that point to the podcast, and which is what I want to come to. And this is my learning, and I want to get this from you. Once you start hosting a podcast in the space in which you operate as an entrepreneur, your thought process on what the market is, as well as a lot of learnings from the podcast, seep in to your product and seep into how you do it. I'd love to know how the podcast happened, but what I want to really know is what have you kind of taken from the podcast and added to what you do as an entrepreneur as well. I think that flow for me has always been fascinating. So I'd love to hear about both.
I must tell you how the podcast started. So I was dropping my daughter to school, okay, and she asked me, and that's one of the best times, right? Because we're both listening to good music and jamming, and it's our time to kind of chat. And at the bus stop, she asked me, "Mama, why are all school buses yellow?" And I'm like, "Shit, I don't know the answer." And then the next day, I said, I said to her, I'll Google and I'll get back to you. And then the next day she asked me, so who's the oldest dinosaur? I was like, damn, ये मतलब क्या सवाल पूछती है? And
what is this? Like I'm stumped with these questions. I'm
telling you. And I said, I don't know. I will Google and get back to you. And then I was like, okay, there has to be something that answers. And then slap on my face, I run a parenting platform, and some video I'm watching and it says, if your child is curious, then you are raising the best child, blah blah blah, whatever. I'm like, so one checkbox, I'm doing something right, because a parent is always second guessing himself, right? And as women too, we have these days where we're like, oh my god, I'm the worst mom my child can ever have, and blah blah blah, and we're going to this self-doubt shit. And then I was like, and then I was doing these videos and understanding that Kidsstoppress, we have built so much access, which is unparalleled, right? The kind of interviews we get, so that was the first whisper when my daughter asked me about all these questions, and I parked it in my head. Then the second time, when I was interviewing, I think it was 2016 or 17 when I interviewed Andre Agassi. And soon after I interviewed Pulela Gopichan, and I was like, of all the people I've interviewed, these two just like, I felt I've arrived. I just felt like I'm next level now, right? And I was like, boss, this is amazing content, and I have this sort of access. Why am I restricting myself to only doing videos on this, right? Because I'm anyways recording the videos. I said this should even go out as a podcast, because I'm sure there must be other fools like me who listen to a podcast every day on their way to work. So I said, so I walk into office and I tell my team, hey guys, we're doing a podcast also now. And my team was anyways, and I feel like, Varun, our teams, I hope they don't connect, because like you, I also do 35 other things, and they're like, I don't know how the hell does she have time, and why does she add the 36th thing to herself, right? And that was it. I just said that, listen, we have to do this. And as a nerd that I am, I figured out everything. I said, strip the audio, I'll fix everything. I found out, I said, I'm hosting it here, putting it on Apple, Spotify, here, there, everywhere. And all of that. And this was 2017 when podcasting was not even a thing. And I think it kind of paid off in a way that, in the kids and kids and family category on Apple, we're in the top 50 shows. So that kind of helped. And then soon after, we had JioSaavn, that happened last year, where we launched on Mother's Day, where we got over 1 million streams in a span of 6 months. Because I feel that, so on Apple and Spotify, we have a kids show and a parenting show. And then we have a separate exclusive on Saavn as well. So we have both of those, and both of those do really really well in terms of the kids shows. We try and address through riddles and stories and Hindi stories, and just curiosity questions, right? Like why does it rain, and tell me about the rain cycle, or stories, or fun like why do we celebrate Halloween, and every question that your child would possibly ask is addressed, or what we try to address.
And what have you and this is the thing, right? If you look at all the guests that you've spoken to, have there been specific moments and stories that are kind of stood out and made you kind of think about, I'm sure every guest brings that out, but about yourself as a parent, but also about what you do and how you're curating stuff, how you're creating stuff for other parents as well. I mean, have there been specific ones that have stood out which you think would be interesting for other parents to listen to and think about? I never thought of it that way.
No, it is. And I keep telling this to everybody. I think I am a human and a parent, which is, a byproduct of the stories that I've told. I always say this. I'm sure that, you interview so many people, Varun. There's so much that we take in, which is priceless, like absolutely priceless. Like I am so blessed. I really feel after every interview that I do, I feel blessed. Like, how can I be so fortunate to be doing this? Coming to stories that have really, really stood out. We're, by the way, sharing your story this week on YouTube, because I was totally blown by your story. And I told my editor, I said, listen, if you keep questioning that, boss, mere bacche ka kuch hone wala hai ki nahi. I don't know if I'm supposed to speak Hindi on the show. It's allowed.
Yeah, it's fine. We speak any language.
I said, if you ever, as a parent, thought, mere bete ka kuch hoga ki nahi life mein, listen to Varun's show. Yeah. Right? That episode for me is a clear-cut thing that, stop chasing the, like building a 5-year plan or 10-year plan for your child, because your child is going to do what drives him, what he is passionate about, and what he'll eventually do, right? I'm a classic case of that. My parents wanted me to be a CA. I could have been a CA. I wanted to be a doctor. They said, no, we're not waiting for 5 more years. We want to live our life, so you can't be a doctor. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to do advertising. They said no for everything. They said, okay, now you finally do whatever you want. And I still went back to that writing piece, right? Yeah. The other one that I really loved was when I interviewed Mithun from Carrot Lane. Oh my God, that guy is a genius. If you guys haven't listened to that episode, please do. And this is not a plug, because if you listen to that episode, you will realize that level of clarity to have is just amazing. And we are thinking that oh my God, to be this to raise an empire this big, you would have very complex thought process or structure. I mean, he doesn't even own a computer, forget anything else, if that simplifies. If you're a founder, I'm like, how do you present your Excel sheets and all that? And he's like, listen, I'm a founder, I'm not a accountant or a Excel genius or something, right? It's the idea. And so, I mean, completely blown by that episode. Last week we did an episode where a parent adopted a child with Down syndrome. And, sometimes I think like, shit, how can people be, how can they have such big hearts? Like, how do you sign up for something like that, right? Because it's a lot of commitment. Forget anything else. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of commitments. I get I get goosebumps even thinking of it. Or when TikTok was in India, and this was early lockdown days, and we interviewed Moni, she had become this, I don't know if you've seen her video, she does it with her son and her kid, and she's this huge TikTok star and stuff. And, so simple. When I interviewed her, Varun, I felt like content creation is so simple. And she's like, मैं घर में बैठ के, and that entire episode is in Hindi, and she simplified it saying, मैं घर में बैठ के कुछ नहीं करती थी, and मुझे बचपन से, to get on stage and be an actor was my childhood wish. And I thought TikTok gave me that platform, and if I can do something for my family, if I can earn a living doing what I enjoy, then why not, right? And just these little dreams getting fulfilled, and then when they share it, I feel I'm very blessed. Yeah, I just truly feel I'm very blessed.
You mentioned how parents shouldn't plan ahead for their children and that such. If you had to kind of turn to yourself when you started off Kidsstoppress and say that, okay, and this goes for anyone who's starting something off, what have you kind of learned from that time to now? And what would you tell yourself at that point of time that you in some ways be good for you to hear? What would those things be?
So when I say don't plan so much ahead for your kids, I mean, I don't mean like you shouldn't plan, because I have an OCD with planning and stuff.
I'm the opposite. No structure in life.
I can't. I need to claim my day and I need to be fully in control. Otherwise, I can go completely astray. What I meant was that, what vision you have for your child is not necessarily the vision that your child has for his or herself. And there's a brilliant book by Dr. Shefali. I forget her last name, or I maybe don't know how to pronounce it. But she said, "Are you living the unfulfilled life of a child through your child?" So, I keep sometimes, my mom was a working mom as well. And she kept telling me, don't waste time in all these stupid things. Do this, have a very sort of structured day. And I am a product of that. So you will always see my, I cannot just watch TV. It's very hard. And people feel like, oh my God, she's so structured and this and that. But it's very hard for me to switch off. I mean, switch off I can, but very hard for me to enjoy. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does totally. I can't sit and just watch something either, and I totally get that feeling because you feel like you want to do so many things.
Yeah, like if I have to watch a Netflix, I mean, I don't like watching Netflix series because it's a series ka commitment. I like, give me 2 hours, I'll watch it and I'll be done. But this is a lot of commitment, and I don't know if you heard this before, but Randy Zuckerberg said this, and I truly, truly believe this. Out of 5 of these things, you'll be able to achieve any 3 at any point in time. Wealth, family, friends, health, and work. Now you choose what your top 3 are. I'm very clear with what my top 3 are, were, and will be, right? At least for 5 years ago, 5 years hence. And, for me, work is priority. For me, health is priority. For me, family is priority. So, I mean, then you have to compromise somewhere, right? So therefore, I don't want to give that commitment of a Netflix series and all of that. So having said that, if you give me something constructive to watch, I will do that. So every hour has to be factored in so meticulously, right? But having said that, what I would tell myself when I started Kidsstoppress, or a couple of learnings from there, is there's just be at it, right? I think and with the amount of things that are happening this year, next year, or what happened last year, I think just being consistent. I mean, I know it's so overrated. I see all content creators say this, all platforms say this, all founders say this, but there is just no substitute to being consistent. Don't forget your why, because the days that you'll feel that you're disillusioned, you don't know what you're doing. And there will be many, many days like that where it'll be like, dude, what am I doing, right? Yeah. Especially the days when, peers from your past organizations have like hit a jackpot and you'll be questioning your spouse or your partner and saying, did I make a mistake? And, that will happen. And that's the day you go back to your why, right? There will times when everybody's out at a party and you can't make it, okay, and you will question, like, why do I need to do it? Go back to your why, because that's the only reason. I mean, that's the only answer you'll have. The other is, I have this cool folder on my phone called Feel Good, which I tell everybody, especially women, because I think we go through a lot of intellectualizing. Is keep that feel good folder for when you feel like you again are feeling disillusioned, or you feel like, why am I doing this, or or there are so many people doing it, why should I be the one doing it? I don't know if that also happens, but those are the times that and you won't believe it, from 2012 to now, I have every message that made me feel good, or any customer email that made me feel good, or any mom who said something or send me a DM or WhatsApp or physically met me or send me a voice note, I have it all in that feel good folder, because that brings me back to my why and makes me question, that there are so many people in the parenting space. Why am I doing this, right? What is the value add that I am doing this? I don't know. Does that happen to you?
No, it does. I have a bunch of I call it my scribble notes. So I have multiple notes where I just kind of screenshot stuff and keep them. So I kind of tend to go back to them. For me, actually, it's almost a more to distract my mind more than I think. Feel good's an interesting idea. I've never tried that. I've always gone to stuff that will make my mind think of something else. So I tend to forget this and move ahead in that sense. Or weirdly enough, listen to a podcast or listen to some music that always seems to calm me down. But I love the fact of the feel good folder. I think that's great. And in whichever form that somebody might want to place it, I can see true value kind of coming from that, because I feel that, you are going to have ups and downs in life, and you'd have some stuff to turn around and everything has not always been bad. And I feel that tendency kind of comes up, especially as a parent. Sometimes the pressure of just like the number of things that you have to do in a day kind of come together, and you kind of feel overwhelmed. I think that's another. For me, it used to be a playlist. For me, it was a playlist I had made for Leia before she was born. And I think in the early year, the first year or so, at nights when I do the night shifts, I would play that playlist for her. It was more for me, I realized in hindsight, not as much for her because she doesn't remember anything. But you got to have some form of that. I think that's a great piece for someone to kind of keep.
Yeah, no, it's really worked for me, and I feel there are so many nuggets, Varun, that kind of I've drawn so many ideas from there. Even sometimes they would say, "Hey, I love Kidsstoppress, but I wish there was this, right? Or I wish you could give me this." And then I go back to that folder, and then sometimes when I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, yeah, does this make sense? Because also as founders, you want to add in so many pieces that you're like, okay, now I have too much, and I need to subtract some of this. So I think it also helps in a lot of ideation process. So I think, yeah. And the other last bit I'd like to add, which again I read somewhere, is the ladder approach, right? Remember, as founders, you will never be on the same step of every task, right? In some tasks, you may be higher up there. In some tasks, you will be a little lower up there. But the idea is to keep climbing, right? So hypothetically, in cooking, I might be at a middle level or whatever. But in say fitness, I might be slightly higher. But every step of the ladder is important. So don't forget that you were there, right? Because that will only, when you look down like that, and especially if you're standing on a ladder, you know how hard it is to look down. Then you will never forget that feeling, and it's okay to know that at different skill sets you're at different ladders, and that's the best part about life, right? So you can keep growing in different aspects.
That's so true. And it's a great way for me to and I have a feeling that the happy folder might actually be this, is that I ask all my guests this question as I come towards the end of every episode, where I ask them what is that one thing which they're really into, which might not be something which they're public, like it's something like if people who know you normally would say, really, you're into that, or you spend a lot of time doing that. I don't know if that's a happy folder for you, but what is that? What beyond the podcast, being an entrepreneur, what's your useless information?
It's my useless information.
I call it useless information because it's stuff which people say is not connected to your career or your life. They just call it useless. So I just call it that. But what do you spend a lot of time doing or obsessing over?
Two things. One is I am. I don't know. This is the hardest question somebody asked. But I'm currently documenting my family's traditional recipes. So I'm getting my mom to do an audiobook on it.
Oh, nice.
So I'm currently obsessed with doing that. I mean, it's kind of work because I know how the format works, blah blah blah. But I feel like that's like a very, very close project to my heart, and that's something I want to do very quickly. And the second, which is not useless again, is I love taking care of plants. And on Sunday morning, my husband suddenly he'll be like, like, why is she up at 4:35? And, I'll be shuffling the plants around in my house and digging and whatever. And people don't get it. People don't get it why I obsess over it so much. But it brings tremendous amount of joy. So I don't know if it's useless or it's not, but it's my
So I
sweet
call it useless, and I give my reasoning why. I call this entire one category useless. Is that people say that there's stuff that helps your career, and there is stuff that is focused on your life in terms of family and all that stuff. Everything in between is supposed to be useless, right? Because it doesn't really have an aim. I feel that's the part which is the best part, because that actually adds to both sides and makes life fun. But I use that term because it is always called useless by a lot of uncles and people when I was growing up. So I use that term almost as a, this is actually not useless. I mean, I wouldn't be doing a podcast today if I was not into useless stuff.
Really?
Yeah. Too many useless things I've consumed in life. Speaking of consuming, what have you consumed recently that you would recommend?
So there's this. So I'm largely vegan, and when I say this largely is because I eat ghee, and I don't feel like that's simply because I haven't found a great substitute for ghee. But I am largely vegan. So there's this amazing almond milk brand, and I hope it never gets into that packaged form. But there's this lady who makes amazing vegan stuff called Break of Dawn. And I'm just obsessing over her Thandai flavors and cinnamon flavors. So guys, if you haven't checked that out, she's fabulous. So you must check out her Instagram page. By the way, my Instagram folders, if anybody ever hacks into that, is the gold mine. It's so well organized. Places I want to travel, places I want to order food from, podcasts to listen, copies, everything, like literally.
It's like I call it secret Pinterest is what I call it.
Absolutely, it is my Pinterest board. It's so creepy, but yeah, I stalk people a lot.
What can you put together in an instant?
Anything.
It's been so many episodes. I have not had a single guest who said this so instantly. But
I put together anything, like literally. Like sometimes my team gets so stressed because I'm supposed to be on a client call and I haven't still shared the idea with them. And just happened the other day, I was at a furnishings. I'm doing up my house. So I was at a curtain store and I was on a call with my client. I'm not going to even remotely say what is the client is going to feel like, shit, this is what she does to our plans. I came up with and I'm talking outside because there's no network, and I come out and I present this idea and the client is blown and my team's like, did you just say that? I said, yeah. I mean, there were two people fighting in the curtain store and I just came up with something and it flew. So literally, I have come to the conclusion that just keep observing people. Yeah, you can fix anything in an instant. Just the other day, I must also tell you this. Sorry, I talk a lot.
Yeah.
My daughter had to say to her teacher a word she would like to add to the dictionary. And she runs up to me like I'm in the middle of call, this, that, whatever. And she's online school, Mama, I need to add a word. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was wearing a t-shirt that day which said Flossom. Okay. And I said, here you go. See, read this. That's it. So literally, Varun, I can put together things in an instant.
Also, you have proven what all parents are doing with remote school is that the amount of prodding we are doing for every single assignment that is there. I'm guilty of that many times, where I'm in the background doing. I think my Pictionary skills or rather my dumb charade skills have really improved from behind the camera or near the mute button in that sense. And my final question generally in all episodes, right? And I've started to do different versions of it. And for you to really be that, well, the answer is quite obvious. I'd love to hear your answers. Why do you think content around being a parent will never die?
Because I feel that, and it's linked to a question somebody asked, which is why should you have kids? And I think it will never die simply because I think birthing. I think having a child is the most selfless act because that's the time you really love somebody more than yourself. So to provide, give, nurture, that's never going to die. And therefore, I feel like content around parenting will never die because people will, it's, according to me, like I said, the most selfless form of act. So I think it's perennial. You're never going to stop loving your kids. And to the fact side of it is that, listen, we're producing 30 million babies in the country currently, with 200 million between 0 to 4. So I'm hoping that even if this 30 million a year comes down to even 20 million a year, it's still a sizable market.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's been a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of I'm taking a few pointers away myself, and I'm sure that everybody's going to look at it from different lenses. But thank you so much for doing this and for coming on Advertising is Dead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Varun. Finally, I made it.
I finally got to it. If you like this podcast and you want to listen to more podcasts like this, head over to the IVM Podcast website or app or wherever you get your podcast from and look at all the podcasts that IVM makes. There's some really fun stuff there.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cedar Tires and thewholetruthfoods.com. Thank you for your support. We did a bunch of cock and bulls this week. We had guests like Ayushi Amin and Puneet Pania for that. Besides that, Vasanti Hariprakash was on, as well as Jay Alani, a paranormal investigator. Really, really great week on Cyrus Says. Do check it out. Tune into This Round is on Me for an episode recorded from Gulmarg featuring one of India's professional alpine skiers, Arif Khan, who's looking forward to representing India at the Beijing Olympics. On The Habit Coach, Ashton has a chat with Kunal Rajput, the popular fitness trainer who recently completed 7 rounds of his Unlocked workout series. The reunified, simplified gang of Tony, Naren, Chuck, and Shrikant discussed NFTs on the latest episode. On The Millennial Athlete, Tanvi and Shlok looked back at all the England championships of the year so far and discussed the interesting highlights of the same. Also on Thale Harate, our Kannada podcast, Ganesh spoke to Archana Shyam of Antharanga Theatre in the latest episode. And on Kadai podcast, our Tamil show, Kavita Jiva shed light in another story about the bravery and excellence in the governance of the Pallava dynasty. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshit. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Nankari podcast every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM podcast app या वेबसाइट पर या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.
Feeling overwhelmed, anxious, struggling with too many obstacles, don't know where your life is headed? Well, if you are dealing with one or all of these, tune into the Positively Unlimited podcast, because in each episode, I share a life lesson, a life hack, a pro tip that can help you get your life back on track. All episodes are available on the IBM website, IBM Podcast app, or wherever it is that you get your podcast from.